Dobrý den. Tak já si dovolím zahájit tuto konferenci. Vážené dámy, vážení pánové, milí všichni, vážená paní prorektorko, vážení přednášející, vážené přednášející, panelisté, panelistky a vedoucí workshopů, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues and distinguished guests. Welcome to the conference on Internationalization of University Education. It's my great honor to stand here in front of you today as the representative of our university's Language Institute, which entire title is Institute for Language and Preparatory Studies of Charles University. And the abbreviation you will find in the papers is UK in Czech, and we use that as a brand. And to open this significant event that promises to be a melting pot of ideas and perspectives. I'm pleased that the auditorium is diverse and includes representatives from academics, the university's international offices, vice deans, vice rectors for international affairs, representative from the ministries of education, interior affairs, and foreign affairs. I would like to thank all those who contributed in preparation of the conference, all those who are participating in any part of it today. We are organizing this conference as part of a chain of events focusing on internationalization from various angles at Charles University and the Czech Republic. At the same time, this conference is being organized by the Charles University Institute for Language and Preparatory Studies, UK, as a part of celebration of 50th anniversary of its existence as a part of Charles University. You are cordially invited during the breaks to see a small exhibition on this 50-year anniversary. The Institute was founded as an institution to prepare foreign students for studying in the Czech Republic or originally in Czechoslovakia. Although our portfolio of activities is much broader today, the preparation of international students remains one of the main focuses of our activities. In this context, we are involved in the internationalization activities of our university. Internationalization is not just a buzzword, it's a commitment to excellence, diversity, and inclusivity. It is about creating a vibrant community where knowledge transcends borders and where students and staff are empowered to operate on a global stage. In our pursuit of internationalization, we have embraced processes and tools from immersive language programs to intercultural exchanges. Each initiative is a step towards a more interconnected university environment. Our efforts extend beyond academic mobility. They are about fostering an environment where every student and staff member can thrive in a global context. We are dedicated to equipping them with the linguistic skills and cultural competencies necessary to navigate and succeed in an increasingly globalized society. Certainly, there are many advantages of the process, like enhanced global competence, research collaboration, academic diversity, improved quality of education, increased employability, as well as we know about challenges and threats like cultural integration, quality assurance constraints, political and economic uncertainty, language barriers. These points can serve as a starting point for discussions on how to maximize the benefits of internationalization while mitigating its challenges. It's important to approach these issues with strategic planning and open dialogue among all stakeholders involved. Today, we embark on a journey through a carefully curated program designed to inspire and challenge our perspectives mainly in a practical way. We will kick off with 2 keynote speeches from our international guests experienced in internationalization, Owen Jordan and Lucia Weiss. Their insights will serve as examples guiding us through the complexities and opportunities of internationalization. Following the keynotes, Vice Rector of Charles University, Eva Voldřichová-Beránková, will unveil the new strategy for internationalization at Charles University. This blueprint will outline our ambitious goals and the innovative approaches we will adopt to integrate global dimensions into our teaching, research, and community engagement. The heart of today's discourse in the morning will be a panel discussion where 6 panelists, experts, and practitioners will engage in an exchange of ideas, sharing their experiences and best practices. This will be an opportunity to gain diverse perspectives and learn from the successes and challenges encountered, and bridging us to the afternoon sessions where you will find answers, at least I hope, to your questions and where you will be able to actively participate. In the afternoon, our esteemed director, Milena Králíčková, will grace us with a speech focusing on the theme of internationalization within the 4EU Plus Alliance, to which Charles University is affiliated, and confirming our commitment to fostering a cosmopolitan academic environment. We will then move to interactive workshop sessions, followed by selected examples of good practice that build on the themes presented in the workshops. These sessions are designed to work with participant suggestions, questions, and experiences, as well as to showcase exemplary practices in internationalization, providing practical insights and fostering collaborative learning. And of course, our conference is not complete without the opportunity to network and have some nice refreshment. We have arranged coffee breaks, not only here, but also at the places of the workshop rooms and lunch. And as we conclude the day, I invite you to join us for a cheese and wine reception, which is a perfect setting to reflect on the day's learnings and toast to our collective efforts. The full program and all information can be found on the website. Main outlines are placed in the boards, and for the workshop rooms, you will follow the color signs according to the room you will be in the afternoon. Internationalization serves as a powerful catalyst for the academic success of international students by fostering an inclusive and supportive environment. It ensures that students from diverse backgrounds are not just visitors, but integral members of the university community. Simultaneously, by stepping out of the comfort zone of a domestic environment, students are challenged to grow intellectually and personally, gaining skills and experiences that are highly sought after in the global community. As we proceed with the conference, let us share, learn, and collaborate. Let us create new partnerships and strengthen existing ones. Together, we can pave the way for a future where internationalization is not an option, but a fundamental aspect of university education in the Czech Republic. And I'm happy to share with you my personal goal for today, for this exciting meeting with you today. And that is that everyone will take back home at least one new tool that they can immediately incorporate into their portfolio of activities. And I hope we will meet this expectation. Thank you for your presence and your commitment to the complex topic of internationalization. And let us make the most of this conference, not just as a platform for academic discourse, but primarily as a space for practical focus. I myself have already met great people during the preparation of the conference and have found a lot of inspiring points and new perspectives. So I wish you the same. Thank you. And I wish you all an enlightening and enjoyable conference experience today. Thank you. And now I would like to ask Lucia Weissová with her one keynote speech, and after her, Owen Jordan with the second one. These two speeches open today's platform for this melting pot of ideas. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lucie Vajsová, and I'm originally from Czech Republic, but I have been living and working in Sweden for last 14 years. And I'm also working a little bit in consultancy, and I'm also part of the EIE expert community for learning, teaching, and curriculum. And every time when I'm about to present, then I think of the whole humankind of persons that feel super comfortable standing here and those who don't. And I will let you guess to what category I belong to. But I think that, or they say you grow when you put yourself into discomfort. And I think the same goes for internationalization and intercultural learning. It's not by chance that managing uncertainty is part of all intercultural competencies models. And I think when it's when we put ourselves into this unknown, and especially when it's also interculturally unknown aspect there, then we tend to grow or panic. And do you see this picture? I used that once when I started to work in Sweden, and you know, Sweden is the country of coffee. You know that, fika, it's the holy grail. And there is something called Friday's fika, and it's holy grail of all fikas. You cannot miss that. And it was my turn, and I was so busy that week I forgot. So I sent this picture to my colleagues, like, everyone panic, I forgot my fika. I was not popular employee for a while. I can tell you that. I still have really bad feeling just thinking about that. But so you learned, you know, all those norms. And it's like, for me, it was lesson learned. I can do any mistake in my job, but I can never, ever forget about the fika. And if you think about Friday's fika as coffee with a modest cinnamon bun, you are totally wrong. It's a total overkill. It's like this. It's like hotel breakfast. So expectations are very high. So for me, it was a lot at the beginning of my international and intercultural journey about this discomfort and being unsure, right? But I think it's about reaching this stage when you feel comfortably uncomfortable. I think you can maybe relate to that. But today, the conference day is about using internationalization to support international students and their success. And you know, when I was preparing this speech, I put my research lens on. Yeah, I forgot to tell you, I'm also a PhD student in internationalization. So I put my research lens on, and I was about, you know, listing all my research findings that are super interesting, right? In my biased opinion. And when I was reading that, it was so boring. So I was like, no, I cannot do that. And I think that eventually I will get there, not to the boring side of things, but to the research part. And so I started to think what it's maybe different for me. And it was actually, let's start from my international experience. I was international student in 5 different countries. I started in Sweden, then I did my master program it was joint master between Germany and Egypt, if you wonder why they are holding hands. And I was also doing traineeship in France, and now I'm doing my PhD in Italy. And as you probably guessed, one country made such a big impression on me that it became my second home. And you will not believe it, but it took the partner university, it took 4 hours to me to decide that I want to stay. And I have never been reflecting on that, because I think that at that time, I didn't have the right tools to unpack this, you know, how it happened. But now, after like working 12 years with different internationalization parts, I think I have tool to really go back and see what this university did so special that it took me 4 hours to decide this is the place I want to be. So let's unpack this experience with me, because I think it can be maybe good for you, for your university as well, to see what are the factors that can help to attract and maintain international students. So at the beginning of the semester, I was totally shocked because everyone was celebrating the start of the academic year. It's not happening in Czech Republic, right? So all students were dancing, singing, having picnics, and having fun. And everyone was so happy. And I didn't get like, why are everyone so happy? And we're happy to start learning. I was like, wow, okay. So it was really different. And so this welcoming and happy feeling set actually the feeling for the whole study experience for me. The second thing, you know, it's often that welcoming international students, it's a responsibility of international office, right? But here at this university, it was responsibility of all, and you could really feel that. You were not perceived as a problem for some administrator who maybe didn't want to speak to you or something like that. It was really, everyone was happy that you are there, and we're like, wow, you are an international student. Where are you from? So they were like really genuinely happy to have you. And it was really a responsibility of all persons. And also, internationalization was really integrated part of the university. It was in the mindset. You could breathe the international vibes. So the hidden curriculum was very strong, and you could see it, you know, like all English sign or all signs were in English. And it's about this, you know, welcoming feeling that they are happy having you. And there were no silos in, you know, usually you have maybe special services for international students and then special services for home students. But there were no silos in the separate services. And I think it's good because then it means that there are equal opportunities to all students, because why you should, you know, handle some students differently just because they are from another country. And university was really celebrating diversity. At that time, it was maybe 25% of students from another country, and maybe 120 countries or nationalities represented. And they really try to celebrate this with different activities that Student Union presented. So every week, several things happened just to utilize this diversity and make it a learning experience for everyone. So the informal curriculum was very strong. And also, you know, small things matter. And with that, I mean, for me, it was, for example, when I finally got my letter of acceptance, I got Swedish candy in this envelope. I was like, wow, I have Swedish candy. But it doesn't need to be only that. It can be that someone at the international office or some administrator you meet will share maybe, oh, do you know that there is this local market on Saturday morning that you don't know about? So really, it doesn't cost a lot to make this special effort that people or students will remember. And of course, I really appreciated that there were no special courses only for international students, because I wanted to meet Swedes, right? So all courses were part of the formal curriculum. So you could meet Swedish students, making friendship, and also learn more about the Swedish culture. And also, I think the added value was learning Swedish for me. And all of international students had this opportunity. And I think it's something that Dana with colleagues will talk later about. So the first impression was super strong for me. So after those 4 hours, I asked during lunch if I can prolong my Erasmus to 2 semesters. And then it happened to be 14 years. It's maybe not ideal if you want your students back. But for me, it was also finding my dream career, because I had no idea that there are jobs connecting to that. I was like, wow, are there really jobs that can deal with this stuff? I want this job. So 2 years later, I joined the international relations team at that university, but that's another story. And now you maybe think, okay, she had it in her. She had all predispositions to thrive in another country. I don't think so. My English was so bad, like really, really bad. You know, I was this Czech shy student that barely dared to speak. So I was quiet the whole semester. And also, if you told my English teacher in high school in Ostrava that I would end up living abroad, she would just laugh at you, you know. But also, like, all my family is living at the same 1 kilometer radius. They don't have any international friends. They don't speak any language. I think in many countries, I would be categorized to category non-traditional student. I'm also a first generation student. So I don't think that I had this, you know, predispositions for study abroad. And I think it's even more wonderful because then you feel, okay, so exchange semester can have such a powerful impact on individuals. So during this, I mentioned some parts of internationalization at home and internationalization of the curriculum. I mentioned the informal part, you know, everything that is happening, like extracurricular activities that maybe student unions and other functions at universities do. I mentioned hidden curriculum, you know, the vibes, and something you cannot fake it because it's there or not. And the formal curriculum, which is also very important, and to my opinion, is the most important part, because it's the core activity that all students attend. And a couple of weeks ago, Dana asked me, you need to mention what internationalization at home is. And I feared that question. Because if you follow the scholarly discussion on internationalization, it was just a few months ago, Hans David, the superstar of internationalization, just sent the message. We should stop talking about definitions because we have been doing that for 20 years. We should start doing things. And I agree, but this definition says that internationalization at home is purposeful integration of international and intercultural dimensions into the formal and informal curriculum. So it can enhance learning for students in domestic learning environment. And I know that this definition is not perfect. And I met Elspeth Jones just last week in Gothenburg, and she's not happy about the definition. So let's move from the definitions, because what internationalization means for me doesn't mean that it's the same for you. But just doing things is the good starting point. And also in my experience and also in research, you can see that universities, they're quite good in the informal curriculum and also to some extent in hidden curriculum. But they are less good in the formal one, where actually things happen. So I ask myself, I never stop learning, actually, because I'm doing my PhD now, so I'm student forever. My family asks me, when do you stop? And I think I never will stop. But I ask myself, what were the most powerful learning experiences for me during all those years? And I identified 3 that I would like to share with you. So the first one was actually in Sweden when I was doing my undergraduate studies, and I did a course on conflict resolution. And it was Swedish class. We were only 3 exchange students there, so most of them were Swedes. And we were presented to the case of Brčko. And it's the city that suffered from Bosnian War in 90s. And the teacher invited through Skype some Irish professor who was mediator in Brčko by then. So we were presented this case, and then we got maybe 2 weeks to find a solution, how we would solve or resolve this conflict. And you couldn't find it on Google. It's really strange. So we had to work. And for me, it was the first real life experience with internationalization and in the learning. And I was really amazed because it was so much fun. So we did that. We came up with like different ideas how we would resolve that conflict. And then we would meet again this Irish professor who would tell us how it happened and how he resolved the conflict. So I really liked that one. And the second one, it was in my master program, Egypt, Germany, as I told you, and it was actually during the COVID. So we met only online with my classmates. And the setting was, we were 25 students from 18 countries, but working online. And it was in the course curriculum and learning process development. And we were supposed to come with their own ideas on developing courses that we needed to develop in our professional lives. And then we could vote for the best project that we could work on, that we thought that could have the biggest impact on others. So I happened to work on developing curriculum for a primary school in north part of rural Bangladesh. And it was so much fun because you knew that you do something and it will be later implemented for kids. So it was also really fun because you could see the relevance of the project. And the third one, I want to mention, it's from my PhD studies, which is quite painful experience, but it's about interdisciplinarity. And I think that it's something we forget, that internationalization is also about interdisciplinarity. And because it brings you new ideas, new perspectives. In my case, some colleagues can mention totally new research methods or theories that you don't think in normal case, because they can bring different angles that you would not think of. So these were 3 most powerful learning experiences for me. And now, what do you think that those elements had in common? Or what is it that craft these impactful learning experiences that I remember still after 12 years? So if we look, all of them can happen in home environment. Because I think all those activities, or most of them, you can do in your classroom. And in the Swedish case, we were almost the whole class of home students. So you don't need to have international students in there. Also, all of them involve digital solution that can bring different people and different perspectives. And also, it was about group work, so collaboration with others. And I think the best value is it was very relevant real life experiences that can be applied, and most of them can also be applied outside of the classroom. But I think what is the most crucial thing is that they were carefully crafted by the teacher. It was intention. It was not that, we put international students in the one classroom and they will learn, magic will happen. It will not. So what really makes a difference? The teachers who invest their time and who feel encouraged and who feel confident to do this work. But we, at the universities, from my experience at least, we don't focus so much on academics. We focus on students, but we forget about them. And we are a little bit hiding behind the numbers. And we sometimes think that diversity on itself is helpful, but you need to have this intention and its difference between compositional and comprehensive internationalization. And we know that academics are positive about internationalization, but they feel unprepared and they feel unsupported. And it's something that I research on. So I look into how universities support academics in internationalization. And the question is, because we know that everyone is focusing on students and we want them to be ready for global issues, and we want them to be interculturally competent, but who prepares academics so they can do this work to prepare students? I think something is wrong in this equation. And there must be support strategies for academics. So universities need to think of strategies how to do that. And now we are, as you understood, moving a little bit to research part of the things. So what do you think that influence academics' engagement in internationalization? Because we know that they are interested, but then other things come in, like we have no time, we don't know how to do it, it's not my responsibility. So we know that there are a lot of hinders there. So there are several things affecting academic engagement. The first part is on the organizational level, and it's about institutional climate and culture. And here I mean everything like, do we have a strategy for internationalization? Do we give time to our teachers to work with internationalization? Is internationalization part of the performance review, as I think it should? There are many other related factors like leadership approach to internationalization. Is it the real thing, or is it only rhetoric that we have in our papers? So you can easily see if university is serious, if they have support structure for teachers. And here I mean also professional development, and not only one course maybe that can go to academics, but also many different support structures for them. But it's also on the team or disciplinary level, because we know that different academic disciplines approach internationalization differently. And you can always read and hear that engineering disciplines are most hardest to internationalize, because there is a lot of anti-feelings. But it's also a lot about individual teacher and about if they have personal capacity to do this, because there might be some preconditions, and own international experience is one of them. But it's also about, if you look into engagement theories, it's about these expectancies versus value, like what I think I will get out of it. And also, what is the cost related? Is it worth my butter? You need to think through. And it's also about job demands and resources, because we know teachers are overloaded, right? So we need to not only demand, but also give them resources to do this work. And then this, of course, is affected by local, national, and global issues, right? Some of my research insights like internationalization of intended learning outcomes matters. We did quite large study and we found super strong correlation between having these international intended learning outcomes in the curriculum and student satisfaction with internationalization at the time of their graduation. There was no correlation between mobility and student satisfaction, but between these ILOs, yes. Also, international experiences of teachers matters, because we found in the same study that that teachers that had more international experience had also more international students in their programs. So it seems that it's something that maybe when you're recruiting new teachers, it could be maybe part of that, okay, what international experiences you have. So you can also target your persons because they can attract you more international students. And also, intercultural competence, it's a big issue. And I will never, ever do that again. But I did literature review on how universities measure intercultural competence in students. 15,000 articles. Never, ever again. But we found that studies reporting on internationalization at home, so it means pedagogical approaches for internationalization, reported higher increase of intercultural competence than mobility studies. I think it's quite interesting, right? And also professional development for academics, which is very core of my research. You can see that many universities, then they create one course and then they think, okay, check, done, we did it. No, because I could see, at least in Sweden, that quite many universities have some kind of professional development in form of course for teachers, but usually the average of persons that sign up for those are like 5. So I don't think that courses really are appropriate tool for professional development for academics. And I think that targeted support is the better thing. And it's also part of my role in Halmstad University. So I work directly with study programs and support them in internationalization of their curriculum. And I think we forgot a little bit about the role of pedagogical centers, because I think there is a big potential there and they could be a good source to support internationalization. But problem is, at least in Sweden, they still don't have know-how about internationalization. And there I think that international officers can step in and have more active role there, at least, highlighting the need and driving the agenda. And also, you can often hear from academics, we don't have time to do that. And I understand that, because every time I speak to academics, they are so stressed, you can barely speak to them. But in my study, I'm also following like 15 teachers before, after, and a couple of months after the professional development. And when I speak to them after the course they are taking, most of them are telling me, yeah, I will do those and those changes. And when I ask, how much time do you think it will take? And they will tell you, oh, just minimum of time, like 10 minutes. So it's also about, okay, they don't have time, but sometimes we need to explain that, like, doing those small changes that can have really huge impact on students don't require tons of time. And I just want to again mention institutional context and support. It's also something we will hear more about the panel discussion, but it's really something that is embedded. Internationalization is embedded in institutional culture, and it needs to be, there needs to be right support. Otherwise, academics will never engage if they are not supported. So to wrap up, some highlights. You don't need to have international students to internationalize. You don't need to have your courses in English in order to internationalize. And I think that by internationalization of the curriculum, we can increase students' engagement that can lead to student success. And institutional support is the key. And so during my presentation, I talk about the success factors that can attract international students. I told you about some examples of powerful academic or learning experience, and what are the factors influencing academic engagement and institutional responsibility to support academics. And I mentioned some of my research findings. And speaking of that, my mom asked me what I'm researching about. After 3 years of doing my PhD, she asked, what is it about? And I was like, you know, it's about internationalization. No, it's about how we can bring the benefits of internationalization to all students when those cannot go abroad. And she was like, oh my God, what a nonsense. And I was like, oh, okay. So I was like giving up the argument, you know. And she was like, no, don't roll your eyes, because only moms can see you rolling eyes on like 2,000 kilometers distance. So just explain me that. So I really tried and tried and tried. And after half hour, she was like, oh my God, yeah, I know, I got it. I was like, okay. And she was like, it's about like educating students so they don't become racist and xenophobic and are open to international perspectives. And I was like, exactly. It's exactly about that. So I was also happy that this argumentation was over, but also happy that she understood the core, and I was so proud of her. And my last slide is just really making those connections from internationalization to enhance engagement, to sense of belonging of students in the classroom and wider university community, that also can increase well-being of students, also the big topic of today, right? A lot of students don't feel good, and that part can lead to student success. Thank you.
Thank you. So, yeah, thank you. Okay, hello, good morning, everyone. Sorry to stop what seemed like it was going to be a really lively discussion there in the break. But nice to meet you all. My name's Owen. That collection of vowels up there, that's pronounced as Owen. It's an Irish name. And I am the director of the International Education Institute at University of St Andrews. And I'm going to be talking briefly today about supporting international students through transitions. So we just heard from Lucy about broader internationalization. This is focused more specifically on how we can support mobility students of all sorts coming into the university. And I'll be talking with a bit of reference to academic literature, but also reflecting on my experience at St Andrews, and also working at a transnational university in China and an international university in Japan as well. So the things I'm hoping to cover, and there's a bit of some bits here I might need to rush through just to make sure we get through all of this, is firstly just what do we mean, what are we aiming for with a successful transition of a student? What challenges typically do I see? Have I seen that transitioning students experience, and hopefully some of those will resonate with you as well. And then thinking about those challenges, what are the different things we can do to support them, the students? Now, hopefully, as Dana mentioned earlier, she hopes people can take something away with them. Maybe there'll be something there that will hopefully be useful for people. And then the final part is supposed to be about how we offer that support. So this is the kind of ideas about vehicles or the sort of places or times that support could be offered. So thinking about being successful in transitioning, I think there are some things that just spring to mind. You know, if an international student is coming to study at Charles University, at any university, hopefully they're a student, they're going to succeed in their academic study. That's one thing. And I think the other is about developing some friendships and a social network. So I think that those are kind of common sense things that are important. I like to think also about integration as being a sort of broader goal for students. And there's a model here which is originally published by Berry a bit earlier, and it's been adapted a bit. But these 4 quadrants of integration, separation, assimilation, and marginalization. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with this or not, but the basic idea is that if you kind of think about the top bit here, we're talking about how much do you kind of maintain your origin culture, where you've come from. And so the integration is the plus side. Assimilation, marginalization is more not doing that. And then also, how do you at the same time seek relationships with other groups and other cultures as well? So higher up is integration and assimilation, lower is separation, marginalization. So what we're really aiming for here is not, in my view, assimilation. We're not hoping students are going to turn up and sort of become like a Czech student or become like a Scottish student. We're hoping that they hold on to their origin country and culture, but that they also bond and develop an understanding and relationships with home and other international students as well. So just in big picture terms, that's kind of what I think we're aiming for in terms of a successful transition from a social point of view, as well as succeeding in studies. So what are the challenges that students might face and that anyone, staff as well, maybe might face moving to some other different culture? And that culture could be, this is something anyone can face really, because that culture may be not just about countries, it could be about levels of study, it could be about disciplines as well in terms of academic study. So the first one is culture shock. And we'll just look at that in a minute. The second is that I want to talk about is just misunderstandings, so miscommunications, and that those can sometimes, even though they may seem small, they can sort of contribute to feelings of alienation and not being part of a community. The third, which I think is very relevant, some of the work that we do in the International Education Institute in St Andrews and also here for the Institute for Language and Preparatory Studies, is about language skills and what is important, what do students need to do with language. And then the final one is just about social connections and lack of opportunity for that. So to start off with culture shock, I've just pulled out this quote here from a paper which I think emphasizes some of the sort of important aspects for me about culture shock. And so this is thinking about higher education. This is when students are attending a university in a culture different to their own, and they have to contend with novel social and educational organizations, behaviors, and expectations. And I think the key word here is the novel, unusual, unfamiliar experiences, organizations, structures, and that all of that added up together, that can result in a sort of unpleasant experience, which people call culture shock. Now, there's a very sort of widely used and quoted model for culture shock, which is often referred to as the U-curve. Can I just get a sense here? Has anybody heard of the culture shock U-curve before? Okay, great. So it was originally published in 1955, so that's quite a long time ago. And there've been various variations of this over the years, and it's also been quite critiqued that this doesn't really apply to everybody, but it is still very widely used, and I think it can also be useful. I'll look at the sort of an example of how that is interpreted in a minute, but it's worth noting as well that some of the critiques of the U-curve model have kind of proposed other shapes or letters. One of them would be the J-curve. So that would be eliminating basically the honeymoon phase and then kind of going from there. There's also the idea that, you know, there could be sort of waving lines of up and downs. But I think a key feature of all of these models is that no one has a model of cultural transition that is just like that. There's always some ups and downs, and there tends to be in the models a kind of up near the end. So the 4 stages I've pulled out here, there are different terms you can see for this. This was just a nice simple one, which I took from the International Office at Berkeley. 4 stages. Firstly, the honeymoon stage. You arrive in the new culture. Everything's unique, original. You're kind of like a tourist. You're excited. It's really stimulating. Then you reach some sort of crisis point where you realize maybe you can't communicate as well as you thought you could. People don't understand you. Things are unfamiliar, and there's stresses sort of building up as a result of that. And then there's a gradual movement in, according to the U-curve, to kind of recovery and then adjustment and finding a balance. And the adjustment, I think the kind of goal here is something like integration, like I showed on that first slide of you find a balance of what you're going to achieve, not become part of the new culture entirely, but maintaining your own culture while also understanding and engaging with the new culture. So I'll just move on to cover some of the other issues, and then we'll come back and look at how to address these. So intercultural misunderstandings. So what we're talking about here is if a student is sort of basing their expectations on the norms of their own culture, and then a decision or a behavior or something seems unusual and difficult to understand because of that. So it makes it very difficult to interpret meaning, and it results in misunderstandings where there's different norms and expectations. It is also worth noting that some research has suggested that for students operating in an English as a lingua franca context, so that would be where all of the participants in conversations and communication are not first language users of English, that actually there may be something there about ambiguity that causes more misunderstandings than this. But I think still in many cases, this is important. The sort of intercultural aspect is very important alongside language. And just to give an example of what this might look like, this is, you'll see at the bottom here, the citation is OpenAI. This is from ChatGPT. I am not that familiar with Czech higher education, but I asked OpenAI to see, could it come up with an example of an intercultural understanding? I'll leave it to you to judge how accurate this is, because not everything ChatGPT comes up with is accurate. But just to highlight, and we'll come back to how you might use things like ChatGPT as well to help building materials. But these are the sorts of scenarios that it can help you paint. So this essentially focuses on an American student studying at Czech university, and their expectations around feedback and also grades and what grades mean were sort of different to their expectations. I can see a few smiles, so maybe there's something in that. So the other thing we talked about was language skills. So if students don't have the language skills they need to succeed, then that's a problem. And particular problems would be, can they engage with the reading they need to do for their courses? Can they write assignments? Can they participate in discussion activities academically? And also, and the final one here is about, can they communicate well enough to build relationships with their peers? That might be a different language, and it will certainly be a different type of language, even if it is within the same language that students are studying. And the lack of social connections. So a danger with this is that students just don't feel very connected to their institution. They don't feel part of a community. They don't feel belonging. And that can have a negative impact on student mental health. So what can we actually do to support? Going back to the U-curve or J-curve, what I think this is useful for is introducing this to students, letting them know that, there are other models, it's being critiqued, but that it sets some expectations for the student that it's not all going to be plain sailing and smooth. And I think this is really important because, looking around, I can see, for example, there's a beautiful banner here, Study in the Heart of Europe. And I think most universities, when they attract international students, they paint a really positive image about good times, nice photos of sunny skies, and great activities going on. So students often enroll with very high expectations. So I think taking an opportunity, once they've decided to study with you, to actually let them know that, there will be challenges along the way. And this is quite a useful tool to do that. So a couple of activities that I think are useful and I've seen done and been part of when I was working at International University in Japan is thinking about the U-curve and each stage and thinking what support, if any, for some stages they may not need any support, but what are they going to do at each stage? Who might they look for? If there's a crisis, what sort of crisis might it be? And if they felt, for example, lonely and removed, what would they do? What actions could they take? And trying to sort of plan that out in advance and getting them to brainstorm that. The other idea here is about creating an action plan to help a fictional student who's going through culture shock, who's in the crisis stage, to give them advice about how they can get through that stage and move on to the next one. So part of the purpose of these activities is to get students to think ahead, make plans for kind of different scenarios they might face. But the other important thing here is just about exposing them to this U-curve and the idea that there's going to be ups and downs, but that there are ways through them. So thinking about the last one here, the action plan to help a fictional international students, my good friend ChatGPT helped me here as well. So I asked it to create a crisis stage for an international student in Czechia. And so this one is about a South Korean master's student. And, you know, they really loved studying in Prague at first. But after that, they start to feel kind of withdrawn. And then the idea for an activity here would be that students are presented with this, given a bit of time to read through. And then they're asked to start, you know, thinking about what they would advise Lena to do in order to kind of improve her situation and move through to the recovery phase. That could be something that's done in a session, kind of like this, but it could also be something students are assigned over a longer period of time to do some research on university web pages to see what support services are available and that kind of thing too. Okay, so that is the culture shock bit that I wanted to talk about, just keep an eye on the time. The next thing I wanted to talk about is something called critical incident exercises and their usefulness for dealing with intercultural misunderstandings and related to that topic area of intercultural misunderstandings. So what is a critical incident exercise? So it's basically a story where there's some sort of misunderstanding or some sort of puzzle that happens, something that's puzzling and unclear. And then after that, there's a question that goes with it, which the participants in this exercise are going to engage with. So I'll show you an example in a bit, and that's going to be another ChatGPT creation. No, in fact, sorry, this one is going to be one from a study. But when we think about critical incident exercises, there's broadly two types. And you can see I've listed them here as what are called cultural assimilators, and then also encounter exercises. And I should say at the moment that I'm drawing here on the work of someone called Don Snow, who's at Duke Kunshan University in China. We also just had him last week as a visiting scholar at St. Andrews as well, doing some work with us on this. So the cultural assimilator, the idea for these exercises are that there's some sort of scenario or role play, and there's a problem that someone faces in a new culture, and then maybe there's multiple choice answers, and the challenge is for someone to pick, I won't say the right answer, but the most likely answer. So, you know, it might be a student going to Japan, they experience some particular problem, and then there's a list of 4 answers, and one of those is intended to be more likely based on maybe survey research or, you know, cultural norms for that country. So for those sorts of critical incident exercises, the goal is specific kind of understanding of cultural norms in a particular place. So that's that can be quite useful. But a challenge I think many people face, is that international students may come from lots of different backgrounds. So if you just pick one background going to one other background, that's not going to cover everyone. And the students may face a variety of different cultures even within a university that they come to. So that's great for general kind of norm building, but it's not going to cover and help students with all situations they're going to experience. So the one I'm more interested in is what's called encounter exercises. And these are scenarios with a question, but where there is no real right answer, or it's not intended to be kind of more probable answers that are offered. It's not multiple choice. And the goal here is slightly different. It's not about teaching about the norms of a particular culture, although it will get students potentially thinking about that, but it's really to promote what's sometimes called slow thinking or system 2 thinking skills. So I'm taking that terminology of slow thinking from a book by Daniel Kahneman called Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. The idea is that this is very conscious, slow thinking, that you think through rationally different scenarios. as opposed to what is referred to in the book as system one thinking, which is very much kind of instinctive gut feelings about something. And the theory here is that day to day, we make lots of judgments using system one thinking because it's efficient. We can't think in detail about everything. And that that works pretty well most of the time because we've trained our minds on sets of data in a culture we're familiar with. And so for operating in that culture, that's fine. But the problem arises when you're then presented with a different culture, and then that training data that your mind has used over all those years might not actually be relevant in that situation. So the idea with these exercises is that it's about stopping, encouraging the skill, the muscle, if you like, of stopping thinking through situations rationally as a habit that you want to kind of develop in students. So that can help students deal with unfamiliar situations rather than perhaps jumping to conclusions and that then perhaps escalating a situation and making it worse. It can also, the exercises can also highlight the sort of challenges a student might face. And they're also very useful to integrate these activities into language classes because they're very good at promoting discussion or, writing activities as well. So an example critical incident exercise, which is taken from Don Snow's article and also a book. It's based around a student in China, and it's a Chinese student who is interacting with some foreign students, international students in China. They go out to a bar together, and the Chinese student feels sort of alienated. The international student starts speaking in English, and then they just leave, and she's not very happy at the end of that interaction. And so the question then that's posed here is, why didn't the Western students make more of an effort to include Shaoli in their conversation? And the challenge is to explain the behavior of the students. It's not about why Shaoli might have had trouble understanding. And a typical task here is to come up with at least 5 possible explanations. And the reason of why 5, that's an arbitrary number, but it's to avoid just jumping to the first conclusion. So if you come up with 5 explanations, you have to think through more than just what are the obvious things that come to mind. So I think a typical, when this has been done with Chinese students, the typical first thing might be something like, well, the international students are just lazy, or they're not making an effort. And and that is a possible interpretation. But then when you start to think more about it, there are lots of other things. They might feel that, for example, they're making, it might be awkward for Shaoli if they're trying to converse with her and they feel that she doesn't feel very comfortable with that situation as well. So, but this is an example of what a critical incident exercise looks like. And hopefully that is something that maybe I certainly find this is quite a useful tool to use in all sorts of settings, but especially in language classes. This maybe, just given time, I won't spend too much time on this, but this is just another ChatGPT generated critical incident exercise where Maria, a Brazilian student, has arrived in Czechia, and she has an interaction with a local student that doesn't seem to have gone well for her. And then the challenge here, the task for this one would also be to think of 5 reasons why this happened. Thank you. So just to talk as well about how we're using this at St Andrews. So we've recently developed an online short course. So I thank my colleague Aaron Rotzinger for sharing some of this with me, but where he's developed a range of these critical incident exercises to prepare students before they arrive to study on a degree program at St Andrews. It's intended specifically for international students. And these are kind of based around some different challenges that students might have living in the UK or also studying at a UK university. So the next topic to talk about was language skills. So, you know, what do we need to do to address this issue of students not necessarily having sufficient language skills for success? And I think the first key thing is a really clear needs analysis about what languages, what domains for those languages, and then also what level are we expecting students to achieve in each of those. So, for example, in a context like this, I think students may be studying in English, but they will, even if they're doing that, they're going to need Czech for daily interactions and really honing in on some of the different specific scenarios that students are going to use language in to inform the language that they're going to be focused on in class. The final one is also quite important, I think, in terms of what level, being clear on what the expectations are for students, that, you know, maybe you're not expecting them to achieve C2 level on the Common European Framework for languages, but also having that as an expectation that then can then be communicated to academic colleagues as well, so that their expectations are clearly set in terms of what sort of preparation students are going to get. And so the needs analysis here, when we're thinking about language for academic purposes, that would normally be informed by some sort of survey or of what is the future academic usage for students of the language, what types of assessment are they doing, what types of group work are they doing, and then the more general usage by likely day-to-day interactions and tasks they'll need to fulfill in their environments. And the final one here was about supportive relationships. So that should be with a few different groups, so with staff, of course, also with international peers and also with home students. So 3, I'd say, different groups there. So clear things to do and things that we've tried to do is just creating regular opportunities to meet with staff. That could be scheduled office hours, that could be bookable one-to-one tutorials, as well as class sessions. Supporting student-led social events, so looking at how whatever limited funding you have can be used to kind of encourage students to organize and to create events, and encouraging them to do that, but to have that as something that students themselves can lead on. And I've just added a quote in here, which I think is important in terms of cross-cultural adjustments benefited when students develop social networks. And I think the key thing is about being diverse in nationality and include host nationals. And certainly at St Andrews, that is a challenge. What Lucy mentioned earlier, sometimes about the international stuff and people, sometimes being kind of siloed a bit. So trying to make sure that there are activities and that bring in home students as well is important. So in terms of how some of that support can be offered, what are the vehicles through which some of those things could be delivered? So orientation sessions, that could be for students going outbound, but also students coming into the university as well. That could be pre-departure or post-arrival as well. So the critical incident exercises I talked about, that was something we used very effectively, I think, in the Japanese university I worked at as a pre-departure session before students studied abroad. But equally, it's something that could be used for a post-arrival orientation week activity too. Culture shock U-curve as well could fit into either of those scenarios as well. The one challenge that I'd note about orientation week type activities is there's probably a lot of other things happening at the same time. It's difficult to find the time. And even if you do find the time, students' heads are often packed full of so much other information that some of this might not make sense to them, which is why we've also been experimenting with having a kind of long orientation, we would call it, so where some of the orientation material is fed to the students online through online activities before they arrive, and then we spread some of the sort of in-person sessions over the first few weeks of the semester. just to avoid all of that being overly concentrated in just 1 week. I mentioned this earlier about the critical incident exercises, and this is using online short courses, but also pre-sessional courses. So these are language courses that we run for students. And they're students, typically for us, they're fee-based courses students optionally sign up for before they start. And as well as being an opportunity to expose students to some of these activities, there's also an opportunity there for students to meet other international students with a similar profile before they arrive. Conscious of the time. So the other vehicles for some of these things are modules and what we call in-sessional support. So that would be optional drop-in sessions for students who maybe they're outside of their credit-bearing modules. They can optionally book one-to-one appointments or workshops to support with certain topics. So some of the critical incident exercises or some of these activities can be integrated into, let's say, language modules, or set up as individual workshops that students can optionally attend. In terms of language, just reflecting on the experience I had at a transnational university in China, XJTLU, it's also possible to, if you have enough students, to divide up the language teaching by discipline, and also to embed some of that language teaching in discipline-specific subjects where there is enough of a need to justify that as well. And that, if you have the scale and the need, I think is something that can work quite well. And I already mentioned about the in-sessional support being something that can allow students to get extra support optionally if they need it. Final thing before I sum up, just to mention, is about personal tutoring. So I'm not sure in each of your institutions whether you have some form of personal tutoring system. At St Andrews, this is not something that undergraduate students have, but it is something that we put in place for our foundation students. We've set this up and been through a few different iterations where we have now arrived at having 2 kind of longer meetings with a personal tutor each semester. Each one of those has a specific focus, so it's not just a catch-up. And that's kind of intended to align with the challenges students might face at those times. So some challenges with that also are that staff need quite a lot of support to know, firstly, what the purpose of each of those meetings is going to be, but also to signpost students to other services. They need to be very familiar with what those services are. So just to summarize key points, so there's lots of different challenges that international students face when they're integrating into new environments. I think the model or models of culture shock that I shared earlier, they can be really useful for just setting expectations and also getting students to think out ahead how they might deal with challenges they're going to face. The critical incident exercises I talked about really, I think, of value in terms of promoting the system 2, the slow thinking skills, which I think will help address cultural misunderstandings for students. Talked a bit about language tuition. That really needs to be needs focused. So thinking carefully about what the needs are, not just going for a general language skills approach. And in terms of where these can be delivered, there's some different options there: orientation sessions and also modules, also in-sessional optional drop-in support. And the final thing here was about personal tutoring systems, and then also social events being opportunities for students to build connections with both staff, fellow international students, and then also a broader student population, including home students as well. Thank you very much for listening. That brings me to the end.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm already inspired so much that I have 1,000 ideas what to implement into our processes. and I invite you for a coffee break. Be back on time, please. And okay, and for English speakers, we will need headphones or headsets because we want to demonstrate that language is very important. So the next session is going to be pronounced in Czech. Co? Tak prosím o pozornost a posuneme se dál s programem. A říkali jsme, že paní prorektorka unveil naši univerzitní strategii internacionalizace, tak já bych chtěla poprosit paní prorektorkou, paní profesorku Voldřichovou Beránkovou, aby se ujala slova. Děkuju.
Tak děkuji. Představená jsem byla. Já jsem teda prorektorkou Univerzity Karlovy pro zahraniční vztahy, to znamená jak Erasmus, tak strategická partnerství, tak internacionalizaci, kulturní diplomaci a další záležitosti, což v praxi vypadá tak, že jsem včera přiletěla z Tajvanu, kam jsem letěla z Finska, takže pokud můj projev nebude úplně koherentní, tak vás prosím, abyste byli tak hodní a považovali to za důsledek jetlagu. Jenom taková krátká vložka na odlehčení a na ilustraci toho, co Lucie říkala tady o těch kulturních odlišnostech. Předevčírem jsem diskutovala s tajvanským ministrem školství, panem Wu, a ptala jsem se ho, jak dlouho bude trvat implementace našeho projektu, který jsme právě podepsali. A on se usmál, pak se na chvíli zamyslel a pak řekl, že kachna nepřeletí rybník jedním máchnutím křídel. A když jsem se ho zeptala, jestli by to mohl nějak blíže specifikovat, tak řekl, že v dnešní době jde všechno rychle, takže bychom to mohli stihnout do 25-30 let. To zasíťování českých a tajvanských institucí. Tak to jenom tak na ilustraci toho, že skutečně ty mezikulturní rozdíly nelze podceňovat a že jednou z dimenzí internacionalizace je i to, abychom byli připraveni jednat s partnery na druhé straně světa a nemysleli si, že za 15 minut schůzky něco dohodneme a podepíšeme. Tak. Co se týče internacionalizace, tak já vlastně tady nic nebudu unveil v tom smyslu, že ještě nic není vůbec hotovo. My jsme teď teprve začali diskuzi o tom tématu. Vlastně vypracováváme něco jako strategii internacionalizace, která by měla ideálně posunout Univerzitu Karlovu v tom smyslu, že by se stala opravdu mezinárodní univerzitou, aby i studenti, kteří třeba nevyjíždějí na výjezdy do zahraničí, mimochodem našla jsem si statistiku a vyjíždí 16% momentálně lidí z Karlovky, což není tak málo v mezievropském srovnání, tak aby ti, kteří nevyjíždějí, byli nějakým způsobem obklopeni mezinárodním prostředím. Měli zahraniční spolužáky, měli zahraniční učitele, aby univerzitní administrativa byla schopná fungovat při nejmenším jak v češtině, tak v angličtině, abychom pro naše mezinárodní partnery byli důvěryhodní a v podstatě, abychom naše studenty byli schopni připravit nějak na fungování v dnešním světě. Bylo by fajn, kdyby ta internacionalizační strategie vycházela z nějakého nově nastaveného profilu absolventa. To se nám zatím úplně nepodařilo ještě prosadit. Nicméně máme tady dokument Folio Plus, programové prohlášení, které definuje profil absolventa jakožto osoby, která je, cituji, otevřená, mnohojazyčná, vystavená multikulturalismu a pluralitě názorů, podnikavá, kriticky myslící, datově gramotná a společensky angažovaná. Čili řekněme, že ty internacionalizační aktivity by zhruba měly vycházet z tohoto rámce. Teď ten celkový kontext, vlastně ta internacionalizační strategie by měla přinést to, že by se internacionalizace stala klíčovým aspektem vlastně všech dimenzí univerzity, to znamená vědy, výzkumu, administrativy, organizace HR, studia, klimatu univerzity, ale i třeba udržitelnosti nebo digitalizaci. To znamená, že to bude muset být určitá strategie, která bude prostupovat všemi odbory rektorátu, všemi fakultami. Nečekám, že to bude úplně easy job a očekávám, že rezistence bude poměrně velká, protože myslím, že řada kolegů si ještě úplně neuvědomuje, co všechno to bude znamenat. Jinak souhlasím s tím, že internacionalizace není cílem, ale spíš prostředkem k dosažení nějaké excelentní mezinárodní kvality studia, špičkové vědy, otevřeného klimatu a tak dále. To vše děláme v situaci, kdy roste konkurence mezi českými i světovými univerzitami. Potřebujeme přitáhnout co nejvíce zahraničních studentů. Právě proto jsem mimochodem tady dnes na vlastně výročí 50 let založení UJOP. UJOP je náš klíčový partner, díky němuž můžeme přitahovat zahraniční studenty, připravovat je na přijímací zkoušky, formovat je tedy v češtině a angličtině. Tak. Možná jenom takové krátké rezimé ohledně Univerzity Karlovy. Ono to na první pohled vypadá, jak jsme na tom skvěle, protože jsme 246 v žebříčku QS World University Rankings. Jsme členy všech možných mezinárodních asociací, takže docela úspěšně lobujeme u Evropské komise, když nastavuje nejrůznější research policies a education policies. Máme momentálně 225 studijních programů v cizích jazycích, co taky není úplně málo. Zhruba 5000 studujících v cizím jazyce, což taky teď bych řekla, že to není tak špatné. Zajímavé je, že když se podíváme na in a out mobilitu, tak 16% výjíždějících studentů máme a 33% výjíždějících akademiků. Jo? Takže třetina akademiků pravidelně výjíždí. Jsme poměrně velmi činní v oblasti kulturní diplomacie. Univerzita Karlova jenom za poslední rok a půl, co jsem ve funkci, tak skutečně objela zhruba 16 zemí. Doprovázela jsem jak předsedu vlády, tak ministry, senátory a vlastně to, že Univerzita Karlova se účastnila těch jednání, často se hrálo i takovou jako uklidňující a diplomatickou roli, například mezi Arménií a Azerbajdžánem nedávno. Zároveň ale asi všichni víme, že ta situace není... Ještě ne. Zatím jsem u slajdu 1. Všichni asi ne. Všichni asi víme, že situace není úplně nejlepší v tom smyslu, že ještě před 5, 10, 15 lety bychom si možná všichni mysleli, že internacionalizace je samozřejmá. Všichni chtějí cestovat, všichni se chtějí učit jazyky, všude jsme vítáni, situace ve světě je bezpečná, všechno je vlastně OK. Potom přišla covidová pandemie, která nejenom odnaučila řadu studentů cestovat, ale zdražila letenky, zhoršila jakoukoliv prostě schopnost naši výjíždět. Přišla válka na Ukrajině, přišla celá řada dalších konfliktů. Já teď, jak jsem se vrátila z toho Tajvanu, tak tam mi říkali, že největší strach mají z toho, že za 4 roky má pan prezident si 80. narozeniny a že by asi dostal nějaký hezký dárek, protože 80 je šťastné číslo a aby ten hezký dárek třeba nebyla anexe Tajvanu nebo něco takového. Takže jenom žijeme ve světě, který je velmi nestabilní, jo, kde my můžeme 3-4 roky psát projekt s tajvanskou vládou a pak najednou někdo bude mít narozeniny a projekt bude ukončen. Takže vlastně musíme být připraveni na to, že žijeme ve světě, který té internacionalizaci nutně úplně nepřeje. Zároveň jsme čistě v České republice v situaci, kdy demografická křivka různě kolísá, takže už nám nestačí jenom naši studenti a skutečně musíme přitahovat studenty z dalších zemí. Máme před sebou celou řadu dalších výzev, ať už environmentálních nebo bezpečnostních. Takže je ohrožena taková ta tradiční představa samozřejmosti budoucí akademické spolupráce. A k tomu bych ještě přidala 3 další výzvy. Vízová politika evropských zemí je neskutečně striktní. všichni určitě víte, jak strašlivě bojujeme i tedy s Českým ministerstvem vnitra, aby nám povolilo studenty z Afriky, z Asie. Rok jednáme o tom, aby nám přijeli z Vietnamu například, pak zjistíme, že nám nepřijedou. Takže to je další obrovská výzva. Potom zužující se seznam friendly states, o tom nebudu asi dlouze mluvit, ale teď jsem absolvoval několik seminářů a třeba o trusted research, o tom, jak si musíme dávat pozor, s kým sdílíme údaje, koho sem zveme a tak dále, takže zase není samozřejmě plně spolupracovat s každým. A bohužel musím zmínit i to, že došlo v prosinci ke střelbě na Filozofické fakultě a i to je prostě věc, která nějakým způsobem ovlivňuje zahraniční zájemce o studium. Prostě Praha není z jejich pohledu tak 100% bezpečnou destinací, jak si mysleli ještě před rokem. Tak, tady výzvy přímo na naší univerzitě asi vynechám, ale jenom bych ráda zmínila to, že Karlovka je složená ze 17 fakult, což je trošku problém. Ta míra fakultní nezávislosti je veliká oproti například Masarykově univerzitě nebo dalším univerzitám, takže v té internacionalizační strategii je to pro nás obrovská výzva. Budeme muset velmi pracovat s vedením jednotlivých fakult, velmi vysvětlovat, že v některých věcech se budou muset třeba lehce podřídit nějaké celkové strategii. Takže to je další věc. Ani nezmiňuji teda určitý konzervatismus naší instituce, kdy opět bude třeba přesvědčit, že jsme tady od 14. století jako nutně není nějaká velká výhoda pro budování vztahů s Ázií například nebo Afrikou. Tak, teď bych asi přešla na další slide konečně. Ten bude krátký, to jsme si jenom tady vytkli takové motto, kterým bychom chtěli vlastně spojit ty internacionalizační aktivity nebo navázat je na ten profil absolventa nebo vlastně na studenty. Já si myslím, že dává smysl vycházet z toho, jako jaké jsou potřeby studentů, jak by měli vypadat, jaký by měly být jejich profil, když skončí studium u nás. Je teda pravda, že trošku předcházející dva řečníci mi to vlastně nabourali v tom smyslu, že je třeba myslet i na ty pedagogy, jo, protože na ně nakládáme obrovské břemeno a čím dál silnější břemeno. Takže ta strategie bude muset vycházet jak tedy z profilu absolventa, tak i z toho, jaký support musíme dát učitelům, aby vůbec něco podobného zvládli. Tak. Tady je jenom pár otázek, proč teda teď jsme přistoupili k nějaké strategii internacionalizace. Když budete trošku všetečně bádat a podíváte se na internet, tak stávající strategie internacionalizace Univerzity Karlovy je na webu, má jednu stránku A4. Jo? Tak jenom, abyste měli představu, že třeba před těmi 15 lety stačila A4, dneska asi stačit nebude. Ten první bod už jsem tady rozvedla, že dochází k nějaké změně kontextu, zvyšující se konkurenceschopnost jsem také uvedla. No, je to takový nehezký bod, ale samozřejmě peníze jsou také velmi důležité. V podstatě jednou z velkých dimenzí internacionalizace bude i naše snaha nějakým způsobem přežít v tomto kontextu. To znamená přitáhnout co nejvíce platících studentů, najít další formy. Teď malinko odbočím, ale součástí internacionalizace u nás bude i fundraising. Máme s paní rektorkou takový plán, jak by se dal využít nadační fond například pro financování části zahraničních studentů, pro které bychom vypisovali stipendia, protože to je první věc, na kterou se nás ptají zahraniční partneři. Máte stipendia, můžete nějak pomoci našim studentům, máte stipendia pro africké studenty například a tak dále, a tak dále. Takže abychom mohli dávat stipendia a abychom mohli reprezentovat, tak nejdřív potřebujeme mít nějaký income, který je zase spojený s těmi zahraničními studenty, mezinárodními granty a tak dále. A poslední věc ještě, proč vlastně ta potřeba vznikla teď, je, že Akademický senát Univerzity Karlovy na svém posledním zasedání se usnesl, že internacionalizace pro ně bude jednou jako z klíčových hodnot v nejbližších letech. A vlastně oni připravili takový jako kratičký handout, který je velmi omezený. V podstatě v jejich očích internacionalizace rovná se Erasmus, jak jsem tak zjistila. Jo? Tam jako víc dimenzí to úplně není. Já to neříkám jako kritiku, oni jsou ti koncoví uživatelé a rozumím všem výtkám, které nám poslali touto cestou a budeme se jimi zabývat. Nicméně je tady určitá potřeba i ze strany studentů a senátorů, abychom přemýšleli nad tím, jaké budou mezinárodní dimenze univerzity. Tak, potom mě zaražte, až budu se blížit ke konci vyčleněného času. Ty hlavní osy nebo hlavní priority spolupráce jsme zatím, říkám, je to opravdu první verze dokumentu, která prošla připomínkováním fakult, ale ještě neprošla připomínkováním odboru rektorátu, takže tohle je skutečně takový první návrh. Máme vlastně zatím 5 takových okruhů. Tím prvním z nich je vlastně přechod od bilaterálních vztahů k síťování. Je to tak, že strašně dlouho Karlovce trvalo, než si našla velké množství mezinárodních partnerů. Podepsala s ním smlouvy, některé fungují skvěle, některé fungují méně. Já už jsem zadala jakousi vnitřní analýzu, jaká je vytíženost, jak to vypadá, nejenom v Erasmu, ale i v mezifakultních a meziuniverzitních smlouvách. A teď najednou se dostáváme do určitého momentu saturace, kdy jsme zasíťováni, nebo kdy vlastně bilaterálně máme smlouvy téměř s každým. Počet třeba Erasmus smluv je mnohem vyšší než počet studentů, kteří chtějí vyjet. A potřebujeme spíš se dostat do situace nějakých jako sítí. To znamená sítí na všech úrovních. Jo? Strategičtí partneři, to tady asi nebudu, ne všichni jsou z Karlovky, tak je to třeba nebude úplně zajímat, ale momentálně vedeme debatu, kolik těch strategických partnerů, jo? Jestli 3 nebo 5, vyhodnocujeme ta stávající strategická partnerství. Do síťování patří samozřejmě aliance For You Plus, ale patří tam i to, že Karlovka je součástí celé řady meziuniverzitních asociací typu LERU, The Coimbra Group, EUF, EUA, co ještě, Unika a tak dále. To znamená vlastně snažíme se momentálně ty naše nejlepší partnery nějakým způsobem zasíťovat do širších konsorcí. V jejich rámci bychom mohli více tlačit na Evropskou komisi, více ovlivňovat to, co se děje, lépe podávat mezinárodní granty. Druhá část se týká hlavně Erasmu, atraktivní a udržitelná mobilita pro všechny. Asi víte, že momentálně spouštíme poměrně obsáhlou reformu financování nebo přerozdělování financí z Domu zahraniční spolupráce, tak jak nám přichází za Erasmus. Nutně to možná nezajímá všechny účastníky, tak to vezmu jenom rychle. Snažíme se nějakým způsobem motivovat fakulty k žádoucímu chování. Jo? To znamená, že pokud podporují zelenou mobilitu, pokud podporují inkluzi, pokud sami jsou ochotní dát nějaké peníze do takzvaných zero grantů a tím si navýší tu mobilitu. Pokud praktikují BIPy, takzvané Blended Intensive Programs, tak by za to měli být finančně zvýhodněni. To znamená, máme jakousi představu, jak ty finance, které přicházejí na Erasmus, a fakultám filtrovat motivačněji. To je zhruba ta otázka mobility. Já dost strašně rychle teda vybírám z každé té podkapitoly jenom pár bodů. Dalším strašně důležitým bodem je internacionalizace doma nebo internacionalizace v domácím prostředí, ono se to překládá různě. To je to, o čem mluvila Lucie, asi tady největší odborník na internacionalizaci doma. Myšlenka je taková, že ne zdaleka každý vyjíždí do zahraničí. U nás je to těch poměrně hezkých 16%, ale pořád jenom 16%. To znamená, že zbytek studentů studuje na své fakultě v Praze, v Plzni nebo v Hradci Králové a my bychom měli být schopni vlastně dotáhnout ten svět k nim nějakým způsobem, je začlenit do toho mezinárodního prostředí i v České republice. Tohle je hodně také úkol i pro vlastně odbor studia a vědy, nejenom pro zahraničí, ale budeme se snažit nějakým způsobem nastavit ty mechanismy tak, aby fakulta, nebo aby v rámci fakult fungovala pokud možno co nejvíce mezinárodní výuka, aby došlo k tomu, čemu se říká dekolonizace kurikul, aby vlastně ty faktory jinakosti a obohacení byly nějakým způsobem včleněny do jednotlivých hodin. K tomu s tím samozřejmě souvisí nějaké mezinárodní prostředí. Já sedím poměrně hodně ve výběrových komisích a zjišťuji, že drtivá většina výběrových řízení se koná v češtině. Drtivou většinu výběrových řízení náhodou vyhrávají lidé z dané katedry. A obvykle vidím. A prostě bude třeba upravit pravidla tak, přitahli více zahraničních odborníků. Pak tady mám ještě jeden bod, který je věnován vizibilitě, to znamená PR navenek a well-beingu zahraničních studentů, akademiků. Prostě pokud se nebudou cítit v Praze dobře, tak je dost těžko přitáhneme. Cítit se dobře znamená mít i ubytovací kapacity, znamená to mít nějaké zdravotní středisko například, které bude poskytovat služby studentům. A internacionalizace vědy, do té se nebudu tady pouštět, to není úplně moje specifičnost. Tak a předposlední slide, tady bych jenom chtěla ukázat, ta strategie internacionalizace se propíše do konkrétních akčních plánů, které budou už tedy podložené. V podstatě to jsou takové jako business plány. Jo. A tady jsou ty, které chystáme v nejbližší době. Jeden se týká teda zvyšování aliančního potenciálu for you plus, což úplně nedělám já. Rozvoj strategických partnerství, o tom jsem mluvila. Ten třetí bod je strašně důležitý. Chystáme rozvoj komerčních programů přímo centrálně organizovaných rektorátem. To tady nikdy nebylo. Má to Masaryčka, mají to další české univerzity a myslím, že je třeba v Praze něco podobného zavést. Vylepšení mezinárodního prostředí, propagace, well-being a věda. To znamená, že zhruba v těchto oblastech by mělo dojít teda co nejdříve k nějakému viditelnému pokroku. A myslím, že tím to končí. A omlouvám se, pokud to bylo příliš rychle, příliš najednou a moc informací na jeden slide.
Okay, I think we are ready to start. I would like to welcome all the panelists, which I will introduce to you in a while. It's my pleasure to be the moderator, and it's my stress to be the moderator for the panel. My name is Kateřina Vodičková, and I will briefly introduce the panelists to you. In the panel, the keynote speakers talked about a few aspects of internationalization in the morning. And I hope that in this panel discussion, we will be able to elaborate upon some of them, to introduce new ideas, and also, thanks to the wonderfully diverse panel board, we will be able to share experience and expectations in various contexts. So the first one you are already familiar with is Professor Eva Voldřichová Beránková, děkuji, not so tall, the Vice Rector of Charles University for Foreign Affairs. Eva is very modest. She didn't say everything about herself, but she enjoys immense working history and incredible experience in many fields. At present, she is involved in inter-university agreements, strategic partnerships, all kinds of international agendas and mobility. She also represents Charles University abroad and cooperates with the Czech Ministry of Foreign Affairs, embassies, European Commission, European Parliament, and so on. So Eva, thank you for joining the panel. You also know the keynote speakers, Lucie Vajzová. So Lucie is a PhD candidate, as you have already heard, at the Center of Higher Education Internationalization, this will kill me today, at Università Cattolica del Sacro Cuore in Italy. Her research interest is in the internationalization of the curriculum at home and other inclusive forms of internationalization. As a practitioner, Lucie works as Internationalization at Home coordinator at Halmstad University, Sweden. I think that in your name, I needed 3 times the long word, and it's getting worse and worse. So welcome, Lucie, please. Thank you. You also know the second keynote speaker, which is Dr. Owen Jordan. Welcome, Owen. Thanks for joining us. Again, you know something about Owen. He is the director of the International Education Institute at University of St. Andrews. Owen has held a variety of teaching, administrative, and leadership roles related to international and language education, mostly in higher education context. He has previously worked in Japan, Hungary, and China, if I'm right. Okay, so welcome, Owen, please. Thank you. I am sure all of you know the head of the Institute for Language and Preparatory Studies at Charles University, Dr. Dana Hulková-Nivltová. She has been the director of the Institute since 2020. Her research activities focus on designing syllabi, defining course objectives, and learning goals in language teaching in various situations. Dana also founded 9 years ago the Methodology Center at the institution, which is systematically dedicated to training and supporting teachers of Czech as a second or foreign language. So this is Dana. We are also happy to introduce to you Dr. Eva Janebová. She is the founding director of Mesthauser Institute for International Collaboration, appointed committee chair at the European Association of International Education, and an associate professor at Palacký University in Olomouc. She has served as an academic advisor to the Council for International Education Exchange, to the Czech Ministry of Education, and she also serves on the International Advisory Board of Morgan State University. And the list could be a lot longer. So, welcome, Eva. And last but not least, I would like to welcome Preeti Samuel Ranjindran, who was born in Papua New Guinea to Indian parents. She spent her early childhood on a floating bookstore ship that traveled around the world. Preeti has worked in international schools and she was guiding hundreds of students to universities worldwide. Additionally, Preeti serves also as a full-time consultant for student recruitment and international student support strategies at institutions like the Faculty of Social Sciences at Charles University. So welcome again. We are very happy to have all of you here, and we have prepared a couple of questions. Some of the questions were already discussed a little bit in the keynote speeches, so feel free to just pick up the highlights and maybe then pass to the others. Thank you. So I'm sorry, but I will have to keep on the time, so I'll be sometimes very strict. Okay, so I think that the first question I would like, Eva, if you could start with, please, because of your experience in different academic positions and backgrounds, it's overwhelming. So what are, in your opinion, the key factors that enhance the engagement in internationalization?
Okay. Thank you. We have just a little bit arranged our answers. So I would like to say a few words about our membership in diverse inter-university associations and alliances. I think the key factor for internationalization, or one of the key factors for internationalization, is that Charles University is one of the most active members of these networks, and maybe 10 times a year we gather in diverse capitals of Europe, and we discuss with other very active European and world universities about precise topics: green mobility, inclusion, internationalization at home, cooperation, Europe, Africa, and so on. So I don't say that this is the one, this is the most important key action, but one of our comparative advantages is that unlike other Czech universities, we are able to meet very, very intensively with all these partners, and to regularly discuss the problems, and then to transfer and to learn, then to teach our Czech colleagues how Harvard University is dealing with it, how Uppsala University is dealing with it. So this is basically my answer.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe Preeti, would you like to add something, because you can see it from a little bit different angle and different perspective, different experience?
Hi, everyone. So this is an amazing topic. And I think that one thing that universities are starting to think about is talking about stories of impact. So when we're talking about internationalization, do we actually have stories that cross borders from students that studied in a particular environment and how they created impact, not just in their own society, because society is becoming really global, but how they've created their education to be a bridge to the current world scenario. So if we don't have stories of impact, it's harder to recruit students because they don't hear what happens after a student gets their degree. And this is the world that we're living in. We're living with Generation Z students that are our current students in universities today, and they are not living in a world that we grew up with. They're living in a world that's extremely diverse, extremely dysfunctional, but also extremely globally connected. So when we talk about home environments, when we talk about domestic environments, we have to start looking at the internationalization within that domestic environment. That's one thing.
Yeah, thank you for bringing this. Thank you. Maybe Eva, would you like to add something? I think it will be, again, a different angle.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation to be on the panel. It's lovely to be here, and I will take a bird's view, maybe a little bit out of the institutions from above, seeing several of them develop. And I think looking at institutions that boost up and speed up in the process, I would say that there was a full understanding of what is internationalization, maybe what you said, that the comprehensive one. So institution-wide internationalization and how to facilitate the collaboration amongst the functions and the units, and that really makes a difference for universities to leapfrog. And then because in the Czech Republic we are fighting with discontinuity, always coming new vice dean, new vice rector, and brings new ideas, maybe the strategy totally changes, and there is discontinuity also in the expertise. I'm for me, seeing even in the audience, directors of international offices that are actually taking up also the advisory roles and really sort of fostering their expertise in international education and not being just administrators of Erasmus or another agenda can be, but really evolving the expertise within in-house that really makes a difference, I think, and seeing either the directors taking up the advisory roles or universities hiring senior advisors on internationalization, really maybe looking at institutions as a whole, not at just work with students, could make a difference.
Yeah, thank you. That's also important to bear in mind. Thank you. Thank you. Would anyone like to add something to the question, or can we move on? Because I'm aware that you mentioned a lot of things in the presentations in the morning. Okay. So please, Owen, I think if you could start with answering the next questions, because you really have a huge expertise. So how can we support internationalization? What is your experience? And again, you can build upon your presentation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, actually, really what I wanted to say is not directly related to the presentation, but it is related to bringing international students in and helping them to succeed to a university. So I think a certain challenge that I see with St. Andrews at the moment is a question really about what is a normal student, or what is a typical student? And I would see that university systems are sometimes built around this idea of a typical student. And so when there's a deviation from that, that becomes non-standard. So, for example, a typical student at the moment, I think still it's fair to say in St. Andrews, is someone studying full-time on campus, 4 years for an undergraduate degree, 1 year for a master's degree, and that's standard. So we face a challenge where, for example, the institute that I lead, we have very successful online distance learning programs that bring in a wide range of students globally. But those students are not always well supported by the systems that are in place because they are not, the building blocks are not designed for them. It needs to be sort of manual workarounds need to be created so that they can be registered properly, because there's all these assumptions made about what a typical student should be. And so I think a really important thing for all institutions is to really look at what are the basic building blocks of our systems and processes, that it's not based around one normal or typical student, but breaking it down to all the different things that exist. So is someone studying full-time or part-time? Do they need a visa? Do they not need a visa? Are they going to need to complete language qualifications before they start or not? And making sure that that process, all of those processes, and curricula as well, are inclusive for all of those building blocks, not just the typical student, and then let's adjust it to kind of try and fit. So I think that is a really important thing, I think, that universities need to pay attention to. And it's speaking especially from the perspective of St. Andrews, a very old university, maybe like Charles University as well, and contrasting that maybe to my experience working at much younger universities where some of those building blocks were smaller and we're more ready to respond.
Thank you. I think, Lucia, you would like to add something.
Yeah, and adding to what you just said, I think what we can see that, universities sometimes they create institutional support, but it's disconnected from the strategies. And then you maybe provide something that is not needed because it needs to be embedded in the strategy. So you get buy-in from staff and students and academics, but there is this disconnection quite often, and it seems super simple, right? Ask what is the need for support. But from my experience, I asked 14 universities that had this comprehensive support, and only 2 did needs analysis in advance before they started to design the institutional support. And then they were like confused why no one is attending this. We created these fantastic opportunities in their eyes, but there there was no buy-in from the other stakeholders because it was not embedded. And so you need to see the why we are doing that, right? You need to be relevant. And I also want to mention this institutional support. Of course, it needs to be this overarching, but there needs to be also other support available on disciplinary levels and at other levels as well. So you can really provide different opportunities for your stakeholders. So because everyone has different needs.
Okay, thank you. I saw, Eva, you were nodding your head. Can you?
Yeah, I actually very much agree with what was said already. And I think that there is, when we talk about curriculum and internationalization of curriculum, if we mean either teaching of international students and home students together, or if we are talking about embedding international perspectives and what have you, and there are other, and I don't want to go into what is internationalization of curriculum. I think what until very recently we have been the international offices, anything that was international, that had the adjective international, was actually shoveled to the international office to do. And I can see smiles, so yeah. But at the same time, the international office here usually are people who work there are more administrators than instructors. And so bridging the divide between the and maybe really redefining what is the role of international office, especially if we're talking about internationalization of curriculum. We either have to redefine it and equip people that work there so that they can lead the process of and support the academics, understand the academics, or we need to build bridges with the professional development department, lifelong learning center, and OIOP, and just really reach out to those that the units that deal with the curriculum, and that is needed. Not just I totally agree with what you said in understanding what are the needs of instructors and meeting them there. But in order to provide the comprehensive support thoughtfully, then really international office needs to work together with the other already existing units.
Okay, yeah, maybe I think, Eva, you will be able to go on in the other question.
And I would like to mention, like,
Yes,
quality managers should also be involved in this process because they have very important role to play.
Thank you. I'm not sure if I'm lost in the slides. Okay. So now I would like to narrow a bit because we were speaking quite generally, internationally. So I would like to narrow to Czech universities. What is your experience with internationalization at Czech universities? So maybe the two Evas, it's up to you which one would like to start.
Don't think I'm the first Eva. All Evas are on the same level. No, maybe just I would like to say just one comment. There is something called the Czech Rectors Conference, and within the Czech Rectors Conference there is an internationalization group. We meet each other once a week, and we discuss our experiences, and we try to share good practice, and it's thanks to this institution that I'm a little bit aware of diverse experiences of the Czech universities. So maybe within this network we could a little bit provide some help to universities that are not so much aware of the topics. And my experience is that the leading universities provide some support and some ideas this thing worked perfectly for us, so let's try it in České Budějovice too, and things like that. So this is just one point that since the moment that our rector, Professor Králíčková, became the head of the Czech Rectors Conference, she insisted in regular meetings and in a sort of network of Czech universities dedicated precisely to internationalization.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure if Eva would like to add her experience or if not.
Sure,
If not,
I'm
it's-
happy to. I'm maybe again with a bird's view over 20 years, because more than 20 years ago, actually, I did first research on internationalization of higher education in the Czech Republic, and it was a study of a comprehensive, whether Charles University has a comprehensive internationalization strategy and how that is working out. And at that time, 20 years ago, when I said the word internationalization, actually many people at the university thought I was talking about Sovietization. And that has changed. And I'm so happy to see that the word not just exists in the language, but we also know what it means. And so for me, the development has been a very positive one, and I'm really looking at it over the 20 years period when I went back and forth to United States, but always came back and worked at different universities, which also gives me quite a nice view how it's done at many of the Czech universities. And I can say I see how small universities actually have invested into building capacities of their in the training of their instructors. So there are coordinators of English as a medium of instruction and at small universities, and they built really trainings and professional development from scratch. And it's just it has been a development from really, I think, catching up 10 years after internationalization at home existed in Europe. We sort of started talking about it. And then there was a huge leap, at least in the policy with the strategy, internationalization strategy that focused on universities providing global competencies, not just to students, but also to academics. And I see the impact that the DSS has on with Chedukon and the fact that universities are now trying to actually exchange best practices. So will happen here, and so I'm seeing the development that I'm seeing is a very positive, and I see that the questions that are now being handled are really about the quality of the curriculum more than mobility, which was 20 years ago the top priority. So I'm hoping that maybe learning communities will sort of a way of sharing will become the way to go among the Czech universities.
Thank you for bringing more positive examples at Czech universities. Maybe Preeti would be the last one for me to ask about this question, because you serve as an international student supporter at institutions like Faculty of Social Sciences at Charles University. So what is your point of view, your experience?
So I'm going to say things that might upset people or not upset people. I don't know. But at the end of the day, let's all smile at each other, okay? So I actually deliberately chose to come to the Czech Republic. It was a very conscious decision on my part. I grew up very internationally, so I don't understand citizenships and borders. I grew up with politics, and by that I mean I was born in Papua New Guinea because the ship that I was living on, by international law, you cannot be born in the middle of an ocean because of citizenship rights. So the ship had to dock in Papua New Guinea, and my parents had me there. And Papua New Guinea didn't have an Indian embassy, and Papua New Guinea doesn't have a right of becoming a citizenship if you're from a different nationality. Your parents are from different nationalities. So I had to fly to Sydney when I was 3 weeks old to get my Indian passport. But my growing up years showed me that you can work in any country, in any context, because every country has its own migration stories, its own internationalization, and its own political histories, right? But when we look at international education, what are we looking at? We're looking at the UK and how they do it. We're looking at the US and how they do it. We look at Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Western countries. But I didn't grow up like that. And so for me, when I worked in US universities and I worked in recruitment all those years in Latin America, Asia, I traveled to Africa, the Middle East, all I saw is students learning about how the US and UK, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada do it. What does it mean for a country like Czech Republic that's considered a white country, but hasn't been part of the Western colonialism history to now internationalize today? So I actually came here to do my PhD to see a different narrative. So that's why I was here, and I actually started working with students that had studied here during Czechoslovakia times from Asia, Africa, and Latin America to see if I could figure out new narratives and build new bridges when Czech Republic is now internationalizing. Having said that, the challenges of the Czech Republic are there are geopolitical shifts in the world today. Even though we're still talking about Western countries, the US, UK, China is the #3 most important country today for international students to go study at. This is something that has happened since 2015, but the European Union doesn't actually showcase this fact. But the rest of the world that is outside of the European Union knows that there is a shift. Singapore is internationalizing. Japan is internationalizing. Everybody is internationalizing. South Africa, they're all doing phenomenal things. So what does that mean for a country like the Czech Republic today? We have to be aware of global scenarios. It cannot just stop at the European Union border.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, for the next question, I think we will stay within the Czech context for a while, and then maybe we'll travel around the world again. I think, Dana, I will ask you, based on your experience and the role of the Institute for Language and Preparatory Studies, could you explain how we can promote the cultural integration of domestic and international students? And feel free to share examples with us.
Thank you. First of all, I would share my experience when I was abroad as a student. They just kicked me and I had to swim. And for a long time, I have thought that this is what it's supposed to be. And everyone should do it like that. But then I changed my mind, and I think that the supportive programs and activities for international students are very good and practical and necessary. And recently, I have changed my mind again, and I think that it's necessary for domestic students too. So what I would like to emphasize is the integration of domestic students in terms of internationalization, because I think this is what creates the environment when then everyone is welcomed. And the activities we do for, we call them foreign students, now we call them international students, because the tradition of preparing and teaching foreign students in Czechoslovakia that has been quite long. But I think that it was led in very traditional and old-fashioned way to integrate them and assimilate them into the Czech culture. And that was it. But I think this has changed, and we have to think about questions like, how about Slovak students? Are they international or domestic? And how about Vietnamese? Are they Vietnamese at all? If they are Czechs living in Vietnamese families in the Czech Republic. So I think that also like the whole society has changed, and I actually think it should help internationalization. So from the examples of activities what we traditionally do, I can name adaptation orientation courses, which are right after the arriving into the Czech Republic, international evenings organized for all sorts of students from different places and cultures. We also have a language activity, Find Your Czech, for a buddy program learning. We also organize international student conference in Czech, where the students who are not original Czech speakers can compete the others in their presentation ability, and are in communication with Czechs who help them with that. Recently, Charles University is preparing the pre-arrival program for students and organizes International Wednesdays, and you can hear something about this and parts of good practice in the afternoon. I also think the good solution is to, if any students can join like sport clubs or theater groups or academic senates, and it creates like one community together, and we integrate not only the foreign students but the domestic students in one pot. And that's, I think this is what we should aim at. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, Owen, maybe you could add your Japanese experience, because Dana talked about a couple of cultural
Sure.
integration.
Yeah, I think also
activities.
the point Dana made about separating off is a really good one. I know certainly thinking about St Andrews, most often now we're talking about domestic and international, we're talking about fee status. So, you know, there are plenty of people who may be perceived to be international who are domestic for that reason. But it's a question whether those labels are really always very helpful or not. But in terms of promoting integration, so just to give you a bit of context, I worked at a university in Japan, which is I think still currently has the highest proportion of international students in Japan. So around 50% of the students were from outside of Japan. And one of the initiatives that they promoted was culture weeks. And this is something that, you know, you need to have a critical mass of students from certain regions or certain countries to do this. But there would be Indonesia week, Thai week, China week, Korean week, and there would be a sort of selection of things like food events. It would be student-led, perhaps performances and other things as well. And this was actually really successful at bringing together different groups of students, because there were large groups from each of those areas, and that they did tend to separate off. And you might think this is just sort of separating them off further, but actually the audience for the performances, the audience for the food and other events they did, it was all the other students. And I think it also ties in with the model about integration that I showed in the presentation earlier about, you know, having pride in your origin culture while also integrating internally. So I think that's, if you have enough students from certain different areas of the world, that's quite a practical thing to do, and it's something that can be done with a lot of student leadership as well. The only one other thing I wanted to mention was going back to the sort of integration with home students and international for using those labels. One thing that we're working on at the moment in St Andrews, and I know other universities have maybe done better than us in the UK, is bringing together what we would call widening access, widening participation, domestic students with international students. But both of these are groups that have, certainly in the UK, report feeling sometimes marginalized from student populations. And there are some common needs, I think, that we can find there. And I think there's opportunities to kind of bring those two groups together as well. So I'm not sure if there's anything similar that exists in the Czech Republic, but those are two groups that perhaps there's something that can be done with.
Okay, thank you. Preeti, would you like to add your experience, or there is...
I think I'll piggyback on what Owen was saying. So this is an excellent backdrop of how to promote internationalization by supporting international students. One thing to add is there are two kinds of domestic students that I know of. One is the domestic student that has grown up in the host country, and then the other domestic student to me is like Lutzi, or like one of my students who is from Czech Republic but studied in India at an international school and then ended up going and studying in Germany and doesn't understand completely the Czech environment. But these are people that are very much part of the Czech Republic and are the Czech narrative as well, so diverse Czech narrative. And so when we're looking at domestic students, we need to realize there are hidden immigrants. That's the terminology that we tend to use. And then with international students, they could come from all over. One of my favorite students to talk about is Bella. She's part Spanish, part Mexican, part German, part Indian, with a US passport, and she's lived in Czech Republic for the last 10 years. And if you meet her, she'll say, "I'm a mess." But she grew up in Sri Lanka. For her, she doesn't identify with the US passport. So we need to realize that it's much more than just domestic and much more than international when we're talking about integration.
Thank you, Preeti, for pointing out the complexity. Thank you. Okay, I think we can move to another question. We have already tackled the problem a bit. How can we motivate and support teachers to internationalize their courses? Lucia, would you like to say a couple of words, please?
Yes, I will try. I think we need to understand the challenges academics have in the classroom in order to support them in the right way. And I think we also need to see what are the preferences for professional development, because I have seen from my research that academics, only 10% of them prefer to have a formal course for internationalization. But then if you look at the offer, like 90% of professional development existing in Sweden, it's in the course form. But we know there are so many other forms of professional development. It can be communities of practice. It can be informal learning, between different disciplines. So there are so many different forms, but we get stuck with this course format. Then it's maybe not fitting academics, especially because we know how busy they are. And the worst thing that most of them are credit bearing. They don't need credits, but then, there are so many examinations connected to that, and academics just give up because they don't have time to, do exams in that. So I think it should be more hands-on, inspirational. And I think, in my opinion, the best support would be to do tailor support, where you really work with the academic team from discipline and you really try to support them and meet them where they are, because it needs to be very relevant for them. And also, you don't need to start from scratch, right? Because there are so many resources out there. There are so many outcomes from wonderful European projects existing. You don't need to create again the wheel. There are many wheels you can use.
Maybe Dana, would you like to say a couple of words about the methodological courses we offer?
Yes, so that's one thing I want to mention, that we prepare teachers, that's language teachers, but for intercultural teaching in methodology courses. But we also do general methodology like workshops, I can say. And what I think, we also have Pedagogium platform at Charles University, which targets on like teachers in practice support with various pedagogical questions. And I think that internationalization and decolonization of syllabi and all these things should be part of this, because we do not want to create another line they need to follow, because we all know that they are all extremely busy and it's hard to implement these things if you have this set up in your mind. So what I've learned from all these activities is that we need not even methodology, we need examples, samples. I do it like this is good, you can follow it and adapt. It helps me too, because you can do it partly in intuitive way, and then you find out more like theoretical background, but you know straight away, oh, this is good, I can try it. And it's easy to start with. And I think then it motivates everyone more, that it's not difficult and I can do it step by step. And I totally agree that there is the professional support necessary. As I said, professional development for in-service teachers, not only those who are getting ready or not only fresh PhD like students, but also associated professors and professors sometimes. We need to see it with lenses of cultural plural perspectives and use principles of effective teaching. And from my own experience, I think that this cultural response pedagogy uses very good tools like reflection on the cultural knowledge of my own cultural knowledge and my own experience from traveling, studying abroad, and working and traveling and studying in the Czech Republic, what is important is like learn about your students. Sometimes it's easy if we have like a seminar of 12 people, but we can have like a huge auditorium. But I think that it's all in the system, so someone can help us to prepare for that. And when we know what students we teach, we can include this into our curriculum and syllabus. And it's definitely good, not only for language teachers, to acquire some basic knowledge of the language that students speak, or at least to know about the language, because it is not the same. We can say that to teach anatomy should be the same for everyone, but I'm convinced that it's not. It's good to know what cultural and language backgrounds the students have. And then it's somehow it should to be implemented in the curriculum, so they know that they are present in the classroom. What helps me a lot is elicit student experience. And again, I can either do it at the beginning of the course, or it can be prepared for me if it's like a huge group of students. There is like evidence-based strong influence on educational success of students and the relationship with the teacher, professional relationship, but we need to show like support. And as Owen was showing us the AI generated things about American students, I think it's totally true that then they misunderstand our feedback. So the feedback should be tailored to those who we have in the classroom. And I think personally that Czech students need better feedback too, but they are more used to sometimes that it's not that detailed, because then students we get from them better performance if we support them more. And no matter if they are foreign or domestic or whatever we want to call them, but especially those who have different habits from their home country or country of their primary and secondary education. So we need to support them, because it makes us more happy as teachers, because we will have better results. So help them to their goals. And as I said, it helps all students and teachers, obviously. So this is like I'm quite enthusiastic about this, because I think if we start with something simple and we can see that it works, we will do it more and more, and then colleagues can see them. They say, oh, actually it is interesting, and they can start doing it too.
Okay, I can see we are running perfectly on time. So I saw Eva taking a couple of notes. So if you would like to say something.
Yeah, actually, coming with inspirational examples, I just wanted to share an example from several universities, and among them is also Charles University. And these are, when you talked about how important it is for international diversity of students and home diverse students to be together, I think it's the same for academics, for academic instructors to be together in a community, so that it's not international staff and Czech speaking staff. And I just had this wonderful experience at Faculty of Social Sciences here at Charles University. We had a learning community, which they themselves called up and wanted me to help them and facilitate. And Lucy was a guest in one of our sessions on international classroom, teaching international classroom. And we had international PhD students, international staff, and Czech-speaking staff together. And for them, it was the first time that they actually had conversations about teaching together. And inherently, they were actually internationalizing their curriculum just by speaking to each other. How do you do it, coming from Sweden, and how I do it here? And so it was just a really very different format. It was not a training, and that goes back to what Lucy said, that they are not motivated because we are giving them trainings that are geared towards primary and secondary teachers, and professors and scholars just need different type professional development, which is much more action research based, much more collegial sharing atmosphere, and that's where they feel well. And I just had, last week we had a couple of Zoom meetings reflecting on the community they want to continue. They want to meet with colleagues from within the European Alliance. They're really excited about it. I hope they'll be able to manage it. And we will post a sort of shortened reflection video with them today on our website of the Mestenhauser Institute for International Collaboration, if you want to see it, what kind of reflections the academics from social sciences actually said about the communities. I just think that really meeting them where they are and what they need, and it just is not a training as we know it.
I can say that we are all very passionate about this topic. Maybe, Owen, I think you have an interesting experience from China to share with us, right?
Yes, so perhaps building on some of the stuff that Dana mentioned about language teachers and having a role to play, one really successful initiative we had at Xi'anjiatong Liverpool University in China was embedding support to do kind of team teaching between the English for academic purposes teachers and some of the content teachers, content lecturers across a range of different schools. And I think, you know, so the people involved with the English for academic purposes teaching generally coming from a much more pedagogical background than perhaps some of the content lecturers. And some of the adaptations that happened in modules tended to be things that were just generally good teaching practice, like, you know, you need to take a break rather than talking for an hour non-stop. Although maybe I did something like that earlier. Or, you know, and let's have some concept checking questions and let's sort of decrease the vocabulary load. And these were things that were of benefit then to students who were studying with English not as their first language, but also to all students as well. So I think there was a sort of way of embedding that as language support for students, but actually can have kind of wider pedagogical benefits and just allow that exchange of ideas to happen more organically.
Thank you. Okay, we talked about supporting teachers and in the context of internationalization. And now we move a bit from supporting teachers to designing courses, which is also in the core of our programs and studies. So what important factors should be considered when designing preparatory programs for international students? Owen, would you like to start? Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, I can talk from here from our sort of UK perspective, in particular with our international foundation programs at St Andrews. And I think there's some key things that go into the mix of those programs. One of them is about language, and in our context, that is English language. We don't live in a Gaelic speaking area. And so generally students are using English for day-to-day interaction and for their academic study as their medium of instruction, although the types of language they might use for those English they use for those things might be quite different. So language is important. I think within the terminology we use of English for academic purposes, that might also include general academic skills, but I think that is a very important focus for students coming to university, and that includes some quite functional things like how to find sources for pieces of writing, how to use citing and referencing systems, but more generally, and this has become more confusing, I think, for many after the sort of prevalence of generative AI, but what is academic integrity, what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, that kind of general training, I think, is very important for preparatory programs where there are students coming from a wide range of backgrounds who may have very different understandings of what is, you know, a norm and what is acceptable or not. And then the final two things, one would be about providing a wide range of social opportunities as well. But to focus on the academic side, in terms of content, there's a really need for students to be carefully mapped to where they're going to go. So if they're going, in our case, they are students who are intended to go on to particular degree programs at St. Andrews, what do they need in terms of baseline levels of chemistry, of maths, making sure there is no big curriculum gap for where they're going, but then also being mindful of where they're coming from, because that there can sometimes be a very big gap there. Different educational systems have very different ways of teaching some subjects. So that kind of mapping of subjects is, I think, really critical too. And actually, I do have one more point as well to say, which I'm not sure what environment you work in within within Czechia, but in the UK, we're pre-degree programs, preparatory programs are very tightly regulated by UK visas and immigration, and that comes with particular requirements about what language, what level of language skills students have achieved, how they've achieved them, how we evidence that. So that regulatory environment is critical to comply with, because without that, we wouldn't be able to bring students onto the program. So that's something that need to be very mindful of.
Thank you. I think Dana will answer your last question because the Institute for Language and Preparatory Studies prepares international students for study programs taught in English and in Czech. So Dana, if you could please say a few words about that.
Yeah, I think that some parts are pretty similar, like adjusting the knowledge from high school with the university demands they need for the entrance exams, and then to start studying actually. Because their goal usually is to pass, but we want them to study too, and ideally also finish, which I think that the internationalization processes and all the tools are helpful for. That's why we have this conference. We do not have this restrictive regime with the language certification, which is a pity, I think, because it's, faculty by faculty, but there is not one like a policy for that within the Czech Republic. And for us to design preparatory programs, so before they even start university, that's they're like subjects they need for their studies. So we divide them into groups according to that, if they want to study like natural sciences, medicine, humanities, or whatever. But the second question are languages as such, because one preparatory program, like one branch of that are in English, one branch is in Czech, and then what our concern also is their typology of their original language, because we have Slavic speakers, non-Slavic speakers, and then very far away and distant typology of languages. And this is maybe more interesting in Czech preparatory programs, because we need to teach them all the content from chemistry, biology, history, and so on, and at the same time teach them from zero level Czech language up to the level they need to be accepted to the faculty. So the language of their origin, I don't want to say indicates the speed they are able to learn, but it is one of the signs how to work with their syllabus and what to do with those who need more support, more language practices, more drills. So this is definitely something that influences it a lot. And besides that, we still want our programs to be not only about academic skills, but also adaptation. So this is what influences syllabus and design of that a lot. And again, there are not only cultural events, but also excursions which go to faculties, and they are connected with the subject they are interested in. So for me, it's like what they want to study, a language they want to study in, and language which is their mother tongue, because that's something, and we have to combine it in a very sensitive and very difficult way, and I hope we are doing well.
Thank you. Lucia, would you like to add something from your perspective on this topic?
Just a very short one,
Yes,
because I
thank you.
don't have so much experience in this topic, but I think that if we are going to focus, on academics at one side, and then I think preparatory courses could be, the other side of the coin, because we could also help. Of course, that teachers, they have huge responsibility in the classroom, but it's shared responsibility with students as well. So if we prepare them, we don't want them maybe to integrate super much and adjust them super much, because then it will be uniform and we will lose this diversity that we would like to utilize in the classroom. But I think just getting them prepared what they can expect and how to handle maybe the feedback we mentioned, but also group work, so they just know what to be expected. I think it can help also teachers at the other end.
Thank you. Oh, okay. So perfect timing. We move to the very last question. You may know that I am a passionate teacher, but I'm also a passionate tester. So I cannot resist. I'm a language tester. So I cannot resist asking the last question about evaluation and assessment. So how can the success of internationalization and international strategies be measured? And I think, Eva, could you start with...
I was just
Thank you.
passing over to Lucia.
Or if Lucia wants to start, you're welcome.
No, I think we're on the same wave, so we'll add to each other. With the how we can measure, there are, going back to what Lucy said, we shouldn't reinvent the wheel, because there are already existing frameworks how we can measure quality, internationalized curriculum. If they are quality ones, there is certificate for internationalization, internationalized curricula. There is a MIN tool. I personally developed, because these tools are really for quite highly internationalized curricula for the Czech context. I developed a tool that is much more sort of detailed, so that there are little things that are not benchmarked in the certificate of internationalized curricula, which is really a sort of when you get that certification, you know that your curriculum, your study program is very internationalized. So I have developed a benchmarking tool that is really just for more Czech universities than other, but the knowledge of how it goes here, and that's how maybe I actually met with the current leadership of Charles University, because I did a mapping of the faculty of sports, and the report was sitting there, and the current vice rector that used to be the vice, or still is vice dean of internationalization, there actually saw my name and said that she's still using it. So I think that really using tools that are out there that are measuring internationalization of curriculum or internationalization of the whole institution, and there are many tools for the comprehensive campus-wide internationalization, like the one that I used a long time ago for Charles University, that is from the United States, which is a really comprehensive one. So just really use it so that we know where our instructors are, because we don't know unless we do research. And however, internationalization is a pervasive process. It's happening. Everyone is impacted by internationalization at our universities, but we give it such a little attention also to the research and to the field. Like how many of us are in the room at a Czech university would have PhD from the field? But it's out there, it's a field of knowledge, and we need to use the tools that are existing in the field like they're existing in education. So yeah, that's for me.
Thank you. Lucia?
Great, thank you. And I can share one example how we measured internationalization in Halmstad University. And I agree with you, Eva, that there are so many tools and measurement tools, but we found also that some of them can be really hard to adjust because you need to measure what you have in your strategy, right? Because it doesn't make sense to measure something that is not in your core activity. And I think that's the case of many measurement tools. It's measuring something, but it's maybe not measuring exactly what you need. So we use those tools as inspiration to create our own tool for undergraduate programs. And we had three conditions for developing that. The first one, we needed something that will not require super huge data collection because we don't have resources for that. The second one, building on existing research and the models that are existing. And the third one, I forgot. But yeah, I go. Yeah. But why we did this measurement, it's not to tell some study programs you are bad and you are good. We use it as a starting point for further discussion how we can support those programs. And if you're interested to hear like what indicators we look at in this measurement, we use we look at the numbers of intended international learning outcomes. We look into how many international experiences staff have. We look into number of incoming students connected to mobility windows and also outgoing mobility as well, but also the satisfaction of students when they graduate, because we have this exit survey that students fill in, and there we have two questions about internationalization. And I think it really helped as a foundation for discussing internationalization with different programs, because you really see then how they perceive internationalization very differently. And also the need for support is very different. So we really use it only as indication, not really like you are good in that and very, very bad. But you can also use, and it's something we used with Eva, and I really just love that method. And I think we also use it at the workshop that I had in November at Charles University, the appreciative inquiry method, that it's really building on the core that is already functioning. Because we know that internationalization is agenda as equal opportunity, digitalization, sustainability, and there are so many competing agendas there. So we need to build on the existing resources and not to try to develop everything from scratch. Do you want to add something there?
Can I just add 2 sentences to what Lucy said about the measurements and the mapping? It was the same for me. I actually developed the tool with really as a portfolio of what everything can exist at Czech universities. Again, as a starting point to conversation. Oh, we have this, but maybe you guys at your faculty have that. And so that people would find themselves somewhere and basically collect what they're doing as inspirations. And so I think I had the same sort of idea behind the mapping tools that I used.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think the last one to close the panel discussion will be the same person who opened the panel discussion. So I would like Eva, if she would like to
Huge responsibility.
add and say. And because we are perfectly on time, we have 2 or 3 questions from the audience. So now you have maybe 1 minute or 2 minutes to make up a question you would like to ask the panelists.
Okay, I think in terms of evaluation, we are at the very beginning. I need to tell it because we are thinking of this internationalization strategy, but for the moment, I don't think we will have tools to evaluate things. Of course, we have statistics about the number of international students, about Erasmus. We are perfectly ready. We have statistics about international teachers. We can evaluate several other factors. But in general, I think for the moment, this is the weak point of the whole thing. We need to find out some tools how to evaluate. And even from a bottom-up approach, from my point of view, I would be happy if for example, the well-being of students and international teachers would increase. So I think we will proceed with some inquiries or maybe the best way is to ask them how they feel in Prague, what are the difficulties they are facing and things like that. Because Lucy, you mentioned the thing that very often institutions are setting up some tools and then they realize that the target group is not interested because we were just theoretically thinking about something. So I think it's very crucial to embed all these thinkings in real situation, in the needs of the people. So I can just promise that we will try to first find out how to evaluate our internationalization, and second, how to link it with personal experience of every international student and international teacher.
Yeah, and I think it's super crucial point that you made, really grounded in people's need, because in my research, I found really funny thing that leadership has an idea what teachers need. Then there are different needs covered, actually, what you see that is really happening. But this is also different when you ask teachers what they need. So they're like really gaps there. So it's really important.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions from the audience? Yes, I will bring the mic.
Hello, I'm Caleb House from the Czech Technical University in Prague. Thank you all very much for the time you're spending with us. I really appreciate the focus on academic staff, which I think is something that we do often forget. And there's the word that came up many times, motivation. But I feel like no one has really hit the nail on the head of what do we do if, let's imagine, some of us are working at institutions where maybe some or many of the academics are not motivated to internationalize and see it more of a challenge or a burden that just complicates their lives. What can you give some examples of how to go to the unmotivated, uninterested academics and to explain to them how internationalization can benefit them? Because I feel like from that point, they will seek out support, they will seek out tools, but it kind of starts there, and that's still something that many of us are struggling with. Thank you.
Go ahead. Yeah, sure.
So thanks for the question. A really interesting one, I think. There's two things that, perhaps worth considering. One of them is perhaps something that can be done more locally. One is a bigger picture thing, but the initiative I was talking about that we ran in China, where we were embedding language teaching staff with other content specialists, that worked well also because it did help alleviate some of the workload pressure off the academics. There was a benefit from them. The discussion, I think, that happened between those two people was stimulating. So it wasn't just an extra ask for them. They were getting some resource. Of course, that needs to be resourced from somewhere, but that's one possibility there, I think. The other is, and I was thinking about this when talking about measuring as well. I don't know what systems for academic promotion exist in Czech universities, but certainly at St. Andrews, where there's strategic priorities, they tend to get buried into specific indicators for what's being looked at different promotion levels, that senior lecturer, professor, and we have different tracks for promotion as well. There's academic education and research education track. So maybe the education track will have things there about, perhaps talked about the limitations of courses, but that sort of course is something that would be regarded well there. That's obviously a bigger picture thing, but somehow lobbying to get some of those priorities recognized tangibly in the promotions process is helpful as well, I think, or can be helpful. Anyone
Thank
else?
you. Does that answer your question? Happy with the answer? Okay. Any other questions, please, Preeti? Yes, Ed, feel free to ask.
So from my experience with working at the Faculty of Social Sciences, I do a lot of trainings for the professors. And I will say one, I feel, so I'm a brown Indian woman that's in a Czech university. And the professors I've always been told, you know, be careful with the professors because they've got, you know, all these degrees behind them and they know all their stuff. I don't have degrees behind me. I'm not a big academic person, even though I'm doing my PhD. I'm an experiential person. And to me, it's really fun talking to the Czech professors and saying, you know, the reality is academia is dying. That's the reality. We're in a digitalization mode. What is not dying is internationalization and sharing of ideas. And if these professors want to stay on, they have to think about that, otherwise they're out of jobs. And it's as honest as that, but you have to say it in a way that's funny and motivating and also give them the ability to share their own, you know, challenges. But you need somebody that's a mover and shaker that's going to go in there and say these things because this is the reality we're dealing with.
Thank you. Maybe Eva would like to add. We have one more question. Okay.
Yeah, I actually, building on that, I think it's even like, I love it. Creating the narrative, how we can benefit from internationalization. And the narrative is missing. You're not talking about it. And it's wonderful you do, but I think we need the leadership, we need the middle management to talk about it, the team leaders, and to really, as we should talk about why students should go abroad, why they should get international experience at home and everything, is just we are starting to, with the narrative, with the language, what is internationalization, but I think we still have a lot to do in building the narrative for us and for everyone, how important it is to support it with the recognition, as you suggested, definitely with the promotions, so that internationalization is part of it. And then maybe even thinking about attractive formats, like what attracts them. I remember I spent some time at Masaryk University, and when I came back after several years, the colleagues said, "Oh, we remember the dîner pensant. That was wonderful." And it was just, I tried to make an attractive format for them to have a discussion. And dîner pensant is really a thinking dinner in French. And we created atmosphere with lights and flowers, and students became the waiters, and we had wine, because we had Masaryk University has faculty wine for free. So we had wine and little bits and pieces, and they had facilitated discussions with questions. But that's, they still remember that it was the atmosphere, and they were talking, and it was the dîner pensant that they loved. And to me, it was just a different format of professional development that I just came up with so that it's attractive for them.
Thank you for sharing it with us. We have last minute for the very last question and a brief answer, please. Thank you.
Okay. I would just like to offer some more suggestions for our colleague from Czech Technical University. You know, in terms of how we can motivate the unmotivated people to internationalize more. Just offer it for them as the solutions to their problems. You know, like to understand better of your international students and colleagues, and firstly, like ask them, like, are you happy with your state? Like, if they will understand better, it will increase their well-being. Secondly, it can also increase their satisfaction in teaching the students. Like, are they happy with the results that their students are having? You know, and just offer it to them as the better way of understanding and also reaching the goals of their students. So the students will also be more likely to succeed, you know, if they will incorporate more international approach to the curriculum, and just starts from a well-being. They will themselves feeling better about their work, you know, and just through the discussions which Eva proposed, I think this is a good idea how to motivate them. Sorry.
Thank you.
Can I just I would have a final brief reaction. I would say that students will not swim in dark pool anymore. They will change the pool. So that's my metaphor for my experience from years ago, and it has changed a lot. So I think they must, listen to this. That's as simple as that.
Thank you. Thanks for ending on the positive note. I will just have one or two sentences. Concerning housekeeping. Thanks all the panelists to be so brave to join us and to discuss the topic and to share their experience. Thanks a lot. If you have any questions that you were not able to ask during the panel discussion, please, when they have finished their lunch, not during lunch, but after their lunch, feel free to talk to them. You are invited for lunch in the garden, and we will meet in 1 hour and 10 minutes, if I'm right, 1:30, for the address by the rector in this room. Okay, thank you.
I'll let you.
I studied the craft.